In the United States, private capital is expected to come up with the financing for new energy developments, and it's really important if we want private utilities to move to cleaner energy sources to help them do that, and that requires the public, the people who will be using the electricity, to take a part of the risk. That is why the loan guarantee program for the nuclear industry makes sense. It opens up financing at lower interest rates from Wall Street and from the utilities themselves, who then feel more confident in going in to financing these multi-billion-dollar machines called nuclear power plants. If we want energy to become cleaner and reliable, something nuclear can provide, and replace some of the fossil fuel resources we're using now, we have to have the loan guarantee program continued and expanded. Probably the most promising clean energy technology for the future of the U.S. and the world as a whole is nuclear energy, because the nuclear plants are on-demand power, they're baseload power running 24/7. They produce large amounts of energy at a reasonable cost, and they also employ thousands of people. Every nuclear plant takes 2,400 people to build over a 3 to 4 year period, and then between 400 and 700 people are employed in high-paying jobs for 60 to 80 years in that nuclear plant. They're secure jobs, they are high-paying jobs, and they're safe jobs. And so we support very strongly job creation through the development of new nuclear energy in the United States. The question is, how are we going to manage that used nuclear fuel? President Obama and Secretary Stephen Chu of Energy have appointed a blue ribbon that will report early in 2011 on what they believe the plan should be for used nuclear fuel. It's very clear that at some point the used fuel has to be removed from the reactor sites where it is now stored safely and securely in 80-ton casks that are among the strongest containers that humans have ever built. They are not going to break, they are not going to cause nuclear waste to be released, so we can feel safe in that. But at some point they should be centralized in 2 to 4 locations in willing host communities across the country where they can be guarded securely at these sites. Eventually, it is very likely that nuclear recycling facilities will be built at those sites, because all of that used fuel represents a tremendous energy resource for the future. And so if 5, 10, 15 years from now the United States decides it wants to recycle that used nuclear fuel, it will already be at interim sites, collected there, ready to be recycled. In the final analysis, the actual waste, the fission products, need to be stored permanently in a repository. This will either be at Yucca Mountain, if Yucca Mountain is resurrected again in the future as the national repository, or it could also be at the sites themselves. In France and other countries, the used nuclear fuel is recycled and the waste products are stored close to or at the site where the recycling occurs. Clean and Safe Energy Coalition has actually done a great deal over the last 5 years to pull people together from a wide range of sectors. We have really strong labor support in the form of the major unions like the Teamsters and the electrical workers and the Boilermakers. We also have strong industry representation, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, many other chambers of commerce at the state and civic level. We have the American Manufacturers Association, which represents 800,000 people who are making things that need electricity to do that job. And then thousands of other individuals and organizations. We represent millions of people across a broad spectrum of American society. So we believe we've been very effective in communicating to the political leadership that people want new nuclear energy in the United States, that they'd rather go that route than continue building fossil fuel plants. So I think it's been very successful, and that we have a very bright future in the Clean and Safe Energy Coalition in continuing to build this broad base of support across the country. Well, my new book, Confessions of a Greenpeace Dropout, The Making of a Sensible Environmentalist, is a compendium of all the major environmental issues we face today. In addition, it is a history of my involvement in the environmental movement from when I helped start Greenpeace in 1971 through to when I left that organization in 1986 and founded Green Spirit Strategies, which is an organization dedicated to developing an alternative environmental policy platform that is based on science and logic, which I found Greenpeace, in the time I left it, was straying from and does continue to do that today. In particular, this book explains not only why I left Greenpeace, but why I decided, after thinking about it long and hard, that we had made a serious mistake in rejecting nuclear energy in the early years of the environmental movement. We actually made the mistake of lumping nuclear energy in with nuclear weapons, as if everything nuclear was evil. Well, there are actually beneficial uses of nuclear technology, and we didn't recognize that at the time. Take nuclear medicine, for example. Obviously, a beneficial use of radioactive materials. Nuclear energy is the same. It doesn't pollute the air, it doesn't create greenhouse gases, it's very reliable and cost-effective, and it's safe. Nuclear energy is one of the safest technologies we've had. No member of the American public has ever been injured by a nuclear plant, never mind killed by one. So you can't say that about very many industries. In my book, I explain nuclear energy in a way that anyone can understand, how it works, how safe it is, how important it is for our future. Well, today there is more support for nuclear energy among the American public than there has been in over 30 years, and it's continuing to grow. In fact, if you live within 10 miles of a nuclear plant, there's 80% support for nuclear across this country. The average member of the public, it's more like 60 to 65%, but it's still a serious majority of people now support nuclear power, where that was not the case 30 years ago or even 20 years ago. So the factors that have influenced that have caused people to change their mind, is energy security, for one thing. People recognize that nuclear is a domestic energy resource that we can rely on for a long time into the future. The climate change issue has had a great influence on people, recognizing that nuclear energy can replace fossil fuels directly and produce power just as reliably and just as cost effectively and even safer than fossil fuel production, because it doesn't have the air pollution associated with that. And I think people just in general have become comfortable with nuclear energy because 104 nuclear plants are operating every day in the United States at 64 different sites, and there hasn't been a mishap since 3 Mile Island, which itself didn't harm anyone. So I think these are the factors. And for people who live in communities that are close to nuclear plants, they've been living there for years knowing that plant is clean, that it's safe, and that it is creating a huge amount of wealth in their community. There's a saying that the closer you get to a nuclear plant, the better the roads and schools are. That's because of the tax base. That plant represents nearly $500 million in money flowing through it every year, and much of that spins off in the form of taxes paid in that community. Well, the fact is, every single nuclear reactor is a small footprint, large wealth-creating machine. They are more dense in their energy creation than any other energy technology, and that is the amount of space they take up compared to the amount of energy that they produce. They also produce a great deal of financial wealth. The 400 to 700 people who work in the nuclear plant are much higher paid than average workers, therefore they have more disposable income to spend in their communities, and they make their community wealthier. They employ thousands of people across the country. So nuclear plants, all in all, have an extremely positive effect on the economy, while at the same time producing cost-effective energy that makes it possible for us to do more and use more electricity because it doesn't cost as much as so many other technologies do. The Clean and Safe Energy Coalition has just recently held its first roundtable involving community leaders from the African American and Hispanic communities. We are reaching out to these communities because they are traditionally not as engaged in the subject of energy as many of the rest in the population are. Well, one of the key roles of the CASEnergy Coalition going forward will be to try to act as a catalyst with the African American and Hispanic communities to help educate them about nuclear energy so they understand that it is a beneficial technology, that it is good for the environment, and that it has tremendous employment opportunities for them. And something else we can do is simply to make them aware of the opportunities for training to get the qualifications required for the many different positions in the nuclear industry. There's opportunities for training in their communities, at the state level as well, in colleges, in technical schools, in apprenticeship programs, and we want to make sure they know where they can go to get that. Well, in my new book, Confessions of a Greenpeace Dropout, The Making of a Sensible Environmentalist, I talk about nuclear energy as kind of the centerpiece in the book because I believe that in terms of our sustainable energy future, nuclear energy is the key technology. Of course, there's going to be many other technologies for producing electricity in the future, but nuclear is the one that can actually replace fossil fuels in a big way and produce large amounts of reliable power cost-effectively. In order to charge our electric vehicles in the future, and in order to run geothermal heat pumps in our buildings in the future, electricity is the centerpiece of this, and clean electricity is the answer. Nuclear energy has the potential to provide more clean energy than any other technology we have at our disposal.